The dandelion. Instantly recognizable by its bright yellow flower and deeply toothed leaves, the dandelion survives almost any mowing schedule, herbicide application, or drought condition thanks to a single, thick taproot capable of driving several inches straight down into the soil. That taproot proves nearly impossible to fully remove by hand, since even a small fragment left behind in the ground regenerates into an entirely new plant within weeks. Once pollinated, the flower transforms into the familiar white puffball seed head, releasing dozens of feathery, wind-borne seeds engineered to drift on the slightest breeze and colonize bare patches of soil far from the parent plant, sometimes traveling well over a mile from where they originally formed. Dandelions also serve as one of the very first nectar sources available to honeybees and other pollinators each spring, often blooming before almost any other plant in a temperate lawn has flowers to offer. Despite its reputation as an unwanted intruder, the entire plant is edible. Its bitter young leaves used in salads, its roasted root once serving as a wartime coffee substitute, and its bright petals occasionally fermented into homemade wine. A single dandelion plant can persist for years once established, regrowing reliably each spring from the same deep taproot, even after repeated mowing seasons that would eventually eliminate most other broadleaf weeds entirely. The crabgrass. Spreading low and flat in coarse, pale green clumps that resemble a crab's outstretched legs, crabgrass germinates fresh from seed every single spring once soil temperatures climb into the mid-50s, then dies completely at the first hard frost each fall. A single mature plant can produce up to 150,000 seeds across one growing season, and those seeds remain fully viable in the soil for at least 3 years, ensuring a thick crop of new crabgrass returns even after an apparently successful season of removal. Individual plants can also produce hundreds of separate tillers or side shoots, all branching outward from the same central crown, meaning a lawn that looks like it contains dozens of separate crabgrass plants may actually be growing from a much smaller number of original seedlings. Warm, dry, compacted soil conditions favor crabgrass establishment specifically over cool-season turfgrass, which is why thin, stressed patches of lawn baked hard by summer heat so often become the very first areas a new crabgrass infestation takes hold. Every entry on this list represents a genuinely different survival strategy that has made these particular species so difficult to permanently remove from a lawn, and Garden's lab keeps breaking down turf science exactly like this, with a new deep dive posted every few days for anyone waging their own ongoing battle against unwanted growth. Beyond simply outcompeting turfgrass for light and water, crabgrass actively releases allelopathic chemical compounds into the surrounding soil, chemically suppressing the growth of nearby grass and other plants to reduce its own competition. Because the plant can still flower and set seed even when mowed down to a height of just half an inch, regular mowing alone does almost nothing to stop a crabgrass infestation from completing its life cycle and reseeding itself for the following year. The nutsedge. Frequently nicknamed the world's worst weed by professional turf managers, nutsedge is not actually a true grass at all, but a member of the sedge family, distinguished by its triangular, rather than round, stem cross-section and a growth rate fast enough to visibly outpace surrounding turf grass within days. The plant reproduces primarily through small underground tubers called nutlets, and research from Texas A&M University found that simply pulling a single visible nutsedge plant stimulates an average of 3 to 4 dormant tubers nearby to sprout new growth within just 2 weeks. Because those nutlets can remain dormant and viable in soil for up to 3 years, a single untreated patch can regenerate indefinitely, spreading outward into a 10-foot or wider infestation as tubers form continuously along expanding underground rhizomes. That underground spread often continues completely unnoticed until the visible foliage suddenly bursts upward in a dense, fast-growing patch that looks nothing like the surrounding turf. Standard broadleaf and grassy weed herbicides largely fail against nutsedge entirely, since its unique sedge physiology resists the chemical mechanisms designed specifically to target either true grasses or broadleaf plants. requiring specialized sedge-specific treatments instead. Persistent wet or poorly drained soil conditions strongly favor nutsedge establishment in the first place, meaning a recurring infestation often signals an underlying drainage problem that no amount of herbicide alone will ever fully resolve. The creeping Charlie, also called ground ivy, this low-growing member of the mint family spreads relentlessly across shaded, damp turf using above-ground stems called stolons that root at every point they touch bare soil, forming a dense, scalloped-leaved mat capable of smothering weaker grass entirely. Crushing or mowing the plant releases a distinctly minty aroma, a telltale identifying trait shared with its mint family relatives, and a direct result of the same square, four-sided stems found throughout that plant family. Long before it became a lawn nuisance, colonists specifically brought this plant to North America for a genuinely useful purpose, using it as a bittering and clarifying agent in home beer brewing centuries before hops became the standard ingredient, a historical role that earned it the old folk name alehoof. Like crabgrass, creeping Charlie also practices allelopathy, releasing chemical compounds into the soil that actively suppress the growth of nearby turf grass and give the invading mat an even greater competitive advantage. Because even a tiny leftover stem fragment can root and regrow an entirely new plant, hand-pulling creeping Charlie frequently backfires, scattering viable fragments across a wider area rather than actually removing the infestation. The white clover, recognizable by its rounded, three-part leaves, each marked with a pale, crescent-shaped watermark. White clover occupies an unusual position in lawn history, having been a deliberately included, prized component of standard grass seed mixtures for decades before the introduction of modern broadleaf herbicides in the 1950s completely flipped its reputation from valuable to unwanted. As a legume, white clover partners with nitrogen-fixing bacteria living in specialized nodules along its roots, actively pulling nitrogen directly from the air and converting it into a form the plant, and eventually the surrounding soil, can use, functioning as a genuine free fertilizer for whatever grass happens to be growing nearby. That same nitrogen-fixing ability lets clover thrive in exactly the poor, unfertilized soil conditions where ordinary turf grass struggles most, which is precisely why lawns showing patches of thriving clover often signal underlying soil fertility problems rather than a clover problem specifically. Clusters of small white or pale pink flowers attract bees and other pollinators in large numbers, a genuine ecological benefit that comes with a practical downside for anyone who prefers walking barefoot across their own lawn. Modern breeders have since developed dwarf microclover cultivars specifically marketed as an intentional, low-mow, drought-tolerant lawn alternative, essentially reviving the same plant many homeowners still spend considerable effort trying to eliminate. Its shallow root system also makes white clover notably more drought-sensitive than the deep-rooted turf grass it often grows alongside, causing patches to wilt and brown visibly first during extended dry spells before the surrounding lawn shows any comparable stress. The broadleaf plantain, forming a low, flattened rosette of oval, deeply veined leaves that hug the ground tightly enough to survive even the lowest mower blade setting. Broadleaf plantain thrives specifically in compacted, heavily trafficked soil where competing turf grass struggles to establish at all. Indigenous peoples across North America reportedly nicknamed the plant white man's footprint, since it seemed to sprout wherever European colonists walked, following foot traffic and disturbed ground across the continent as settlement spread. Slender, upright flower spikes rise well above the flattened leaf rosette, each one capable of producing thousands of tiny seeds that spread easily through foot traffic, lawn equipment, and even bird droppings after the seeds pass through undigested. The plant's tough, fibrous root system and low growth habit make it remarkably resistant to both foot traffic and standard mowing, allowing established plantain persist for years in exactly the high traffic pathways and worn patches where grass alone would eventually give up entirely. Historically valued as a medicinal herb across multiple cultures for treating minor cuts, stings, and skin irritation, broadleaf plantain's crushed leaves were traditionally applied directly to the skin as a soothing poultice long before it became simply another lawn weed to remove. Two nearly identical species, broadleaf plantain and narrowleaf plantain, frequently grow side by side in the same compacted turf, distinguished mainly by leaf shape rather than any meaningful difference in how aggressively each one tolerates foot traffic and low mowing. The chickweed, forming dense, low mats of small, oval leaves connected along thin, sprawling stems. Common chickweed germinates and grows rapidly during the cool temperatures of early spring and fall, often completing its entire life cycle from seed to seed in as little as 5 to 6 weeks under ideal conditions. That rapid cycle allows a single infestation to produce several overlapping generations within a single cool season, and because seeds can remain viable in soil for years. A chickweed problem left unaddressed one spring routinely resurfaces the following year, regardless of how thoroughly the visible plants were removed. A distinctive single line of fine hairs running along one side of the stem, alternating sides at each leaf node, offers one of the most reliable ways to positively identify true chickweed among several visually similar low-growing weeds. Small white star-shaped flowers open specifically on sunny mornings and close again by early afternoon. A light-sensitive blooming pattern that has earned the plant a reputation among gardeners as an informal, if unreliable, natural weather indicator. Despite its weedy reputation in lawns, chickweed is entirely edible and mildly nutritious. Historically foraged and added fresh to salads across Europe long before it spread widely into cultivated lawns and garden beds throughout North America. Because the plant thrives specifically in the cool, damp conditions of early spring and late fall. A sudden chickweed outbreak often signals exactly the temperature and moisture window when a lawn's own turf grass has slowed its own growth the most, leaving open ground for chickweed to fill instead. The bindweed, twining aggressively around any nearby grass blade, fence, or upright object it encounters. Field bindweed produces delicate, trumpet-shaped white or pale pink flowers that closely resemble the ornamental morning glory it is distantly related to, a deceptive resemblance that masks one of the most persistent weeds a lawn or garden can develop. Its true danger lies almost entirely underground, where a mature bindweed root system can extend down more than 20 feet and spread horizontally more than 10 feet from the original plant, storing enormous underground energy reserves capable of resprouting new growth for years after the visible vine has been cut back. Even a small root fragment as short as 2 inches left behind after incomplete removal contains enough stored energy to regenerate an entirely new, independently spreading plant. Like several other species on this list, bindweed also releases allelopathic compounds into the surrounding soil, actively suppressing the germination and growth of nearby plants competing for the same space and resources. Because its extensive root system stores years of reserve energy, a single season of even the most thorough visible removal rarely eliminates bindweed completely, and most successful control programs require several consecutive years of persistent, repeated treatment before the plant's underground reserves finally exhaust themselves. Its resemblance to ornamental morning glory occasionally leads inexperienced gardeners to mistakenly welcome the first few vines into a flower bed, only to discover months later exactly how aggressively the plant intends to spread once fully established.